my name is Vadim. I'm one of the maintainers of the project Harbor, and we, support the project, help companies adopt Harbor, cloud providers, enterprises, everyone who is dealing with seriously with containers and managing containers, right? It's not about running them, it's more about managing them. And so let's skip the introduction. And if you don't know Harbor, Harbor is a container registry. It's an open CNCF graduated open source container registry to not just store container images. This is what everyone can do. It's about managing them, right? Managing them across teams, organizations, that you can have policies that you basically also, keep things tidy, right? So that you don't have like petabytes of data after a year. And consume resources, thoughtfully. And Harbor is already 8 years old, right? So we're going still strong, and it's basically one of the de facto standards when it comes to container image management in the open source space. It's quite popular solution, and a colleague of mine, Victor, maybe you know him already. He says about Harvard is like the gold standard when it comes to container registry, and he's right about that, I think, and that's why I'm quoting him shamelessly. Harbor has a ton of features like access control, artifact distribution, security compliance, vulnerability scan, artifact signature, and policies for maintainability, and like all those buzzwords. But I think more interestingly is like look it from the perspective of the users, like who is using it and who's consuming it. And I call it a bit of superpowers. And one superpower is that it works nicely for small teams and enterprises. So you can start just with the basic functionality, and you can grow into advanced features like, role-based access controls, you're attaching your IDP, using more and more features, transitioning to GitOps workflows and things like this. So it's really has a nice path of how we can grow into with the product. It makes CISO happy because you can use it to, for example, to have all your images in one place. So you can replicate images from other registries or to other registries. You can proxy images. So you can use it in a way to have a really good overview about your containerized image artifacts or container image stock or whatever you call it. And it's then ops people darling because you can automate a lot of things with it, right? So compared to other solutions, you can really automate a lot of things like with REST APIs, with Terraform, with Pulumi. You can set up GitOps workflows. You can maintain the whole repository across teams. So you can use quotas, policies, so that everything stays tidy and manageable. So this is a bit overview about Harbor. Let's see what we have today. And I'm looking now at the current release and also the one that is coming in a few weeks. So one big change in this OCI world was the introduction of OCI distribution spec 1.1. Most of people never heard of it and probably will never heard of it. But if you want to sound fancy, there's just one thing that you need to know. And it's basically the capabilities that you can use an artifact and reference another artifact, right? So you can chain artifacts and you can kind of link artifacts together. So this is basically it in a nutshell, right? And this opens up a lot of opportunities in this whole space, right? Not just for container images, but for other types of artifacts. And organizations, people are starting using that. The most prominent ones are like signatures, where they can attach signatures to images, and you can use them, like in other ways, but not nowadays. Like in the future, you will use this distribution spec 1.1 so that you can reference your artifact with other artifacts, and those artifacts can contain, for example, signatures. They can contain SBOMs, and then also the SBOM can contain a signature again, so you can basically create a chain of artifacts, and you can attach those along the way, right? So, and this is a big change in the capabilities, and a lot of projects are starting adopting this, including Harbor. And we use this basically for two functionalities. One is, of course, for signatures like notation and Zigstore. And the other one, which is coming next, is for SBOM generation. and the vulnerability scanning results, for example. Then we have the security hub in Harbor integrated. So basically what you can do is you can reverse search of vulnerabilities. It's like not the vulnerabilities are attached to the image, so you can now kind of do a reverse search. You can look in which images those vulnerabilities are there. So it's basically the bit of the capabilities that you see from other vulnerabilities tools built into Harbor, and you can export this functionality, or you can attach this to other workflows that triggers emails and things like this. You can kind of change this with the API and adapt it to your requirements, but the basic functionality is there. And to support that all functionalities, there is a kind of important functionality in Harbor, which is called the pluggable scanner specification, which is doesn't specifically focus on scanners, but it's a specification that people or projects adapt so they can interact with Harbor. Like, for example, the most prominent ones are the vulnerability scanners. So I think Harbor supports like 5, 6, 7 open source vulnerability scanners and a few commercial ones. And they are all using this API so that the scanner can interact with Harbor. And this is now possible for vulnerabilities and also for the SBOM generation. I think we're supporting SPDY. Oh, yeah, I think SPDX or SPDY. I don't know the format, SPDX. Yeah, so SPDX or SPDY. We support that to list this information from the scanner to Harbor. And then the functionality wise, we're going to have a new Harbor CLI that you can use in your CI/CD pipelines. So you can interact with the Harbor API over CLI. Like basically, it's in my opinion, it's usable for CI/CD pipelines, maybe for your command line if you're a developer. Might be interesting if you're I don't like web UIs, but because people don't interact with the web UI that much in general, I think this is more important for the CI/CD workflows. So you can kind of tag images, you can retag images, apply labels, you can kind of do staging processes with images and move them along the deployment stage. And the interesting thing is if you know someone, or if you have like students working in your organization, this is developed by the LFX mentorship program. So LFX is the Linux Foundation mentorship program. So there's like mostly young professionals and students who have the opportunity to contribute to open source project. They get a bit of money for doing so, and open source projects can use this mentorship program to promote tasks and distribute tasks to young professionals. And we have a lot of professionals from certain regions applying for mentorship programs, and I basically never see someone from Europe, which is bad, but it's a bit of a one-sided thing. And I think if you have students working in your organization, you should definitely mention this program to them because it's kind of good. And the same goes for the next project that is called Harbor Satellite. And Harbor Satellite is basically the capability of bringing a registry to the edge, or thousands of registries to the edge, so you can, because now Kubernetes is running more and more on edge locations, and it would make sense when there is a registry nearby. And this is what Harbor Satellite trying to address, so you can distribute images across hundreds and thousands of registries so that they are closer to the workloads where they're running. And this is also kind of partly developed by LFX mentorship program participants, and it is also supported from our Harbor community with various people. One big thanks to Philip Lane. I'm not sure if you're in this Kubernetes space, you probably heard about the project Spiegel, which is Swedish for Spiegel, if you don't speak Swedish. And it's a cool project which allows you to distribute container images on the edge. And it's basically kind of a caching mechanism for images, and it's very fancy solution because it allows you to store images in a stateless cluster, which is something very powerful. So you can have stateful images in a stateless cluster or stateful registry. And we're trying to build upon that in the satellite so that we can run stateful registry in a stateless cluster. All right, and the same goes for the OCI, all the things. We built a project recently, which is called the Crazy Lab Experiment, and I'm thinking about, okay, what would it take to support other artifacts, right, in OCI registries? I'm thinking here about Maven, NPM, and PyPy packages. What does it take, to get them into OCI? And there are, of course, two options. One is the proxy mode, where you do the translation, like you translate the API request into OCI and back. And the other mode is more powerful, of course, but more labor intense because you need to change the client side, is that support OCI natively. And it has a few big advantages because, yeah, like the ecosystem opening up for those artifacts is quite powerful. And also the capabilities there are something that you don't see in other artifact repositories. And it's kind of a thinking about, will it be a game changer or not? Does it worth the effort? And we built a little tool that does this already. It's called the NPM registry OCI. And there is also another thing that's called the OCI proxy, which is basically translate your Helm chart museum formatted chart into OCI formatted charts on the fly. So you can use your third-party charts like Bitnami or Jetstack and translate them into or transfer them into your OCI registry or consume them as OCI artifacts, which might be beneficial in some contexts if you want to go fully OCI. This is a kind of powerful solution that's widely used nowadays already, and I'm happy that it's useful. And it's just an example, right? So you just basically have a proxy, and you have the proxy host, and then you have the indication where you want to proxy from, like chart Jetstack, and then what you want to proxy for, and then you have the version, and it will translate this into a Helm chart in the chart museum format. And you can also use this for other things, and or you can build upon this. Right. Currently, we're working on the SBOM functionality, so there's going to be a release with SBOM support in April, and also, of course, a ton of bug fixes and minor feature improvements. And then, yeah, so the SBOM functionality, I think I don't need to go into detail of that, but the SBOM provides you a bit of information of what is inside your images, right? What is the dependencies, what are the libraries, what are the licenses, who is the author, so you have a better understanding what is inside your container image. It's not accurate, if you do the scanning, right? It does only work for open source projects, but for a lot of organizations, it's already enough to see if there are some license problems and things like this, or if they're depending on outdated libraries. This is basically how it looks like. It's in kind of a tree, and you can kind of go with this tree and then see then what images you have there inside, or the images, sorry, the artifacts or libraries you have in the OCI artifact. And this is basically the functionality where we're gonna expand in the next releases, like the SBOM capabilities, so that you can do the reverse search of SBOM functionality, so we can find out, okay, in which containers is this SBOM present, and yeah, how this affects your kind of supply chain. And this is basically the functionality we're working on. If you would like to contribute, if you're using Harbor and you would like to contribute or would like to find out more, there is basically two places where you should be heading to. One is the Slack channel, the CNCF Slack channel, where we are present, and the other one is the mailing list or the Harbor community meeting that is held every 2 weeks.